Author Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Outliers, in which he talks about how NHL players are disproportionately born in January. You would think maybe 1/12 of the league, give or take, is born in January, and it ends up being close to, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the league born in January, or those first 45 days of the year. And the reason he decides, or the conclusion he comes to, is because the Canadian Youth Hockey League has its cutoff date on December 31st. So anybody born in January, that first month, will have a little bit of an advantage over the people born in December. A 12-month age advantage isn't a huge deal when you're 26 or 27 in NHL, but if you have a 6 or 7-year-old, like I do, you know that 12 months is a huge difference in growth. So a kid born in January may end up being much bigger, maybe much more talented and nimble than someone born in December. So those kids start off with a little bit of an advantage. And because of that, maybe they receive some extra coaching. They graduate to a travel league a little bit quicker and get even better coaching. And it kind of goes from there. What starts off as a very little gap becomes a much bigger gap by the time they're 16 or 17 years old, and to the point that that's why you have more NHL players born in January and February than the later months of the year. Small gap becomes a huge gap. As we start episode 2, Women Hate Women. I mean, this is a fact, right? I mean, you can't put two cats in a cage and expect them to get along at the end of the day, because women are all just, jockeying for male attention, right? No. I don't know that anybody actually thinks that, and if there is, I certainly don't want to associate with them. Hopefully you can tell I'm being sarcastic. I think this idea, more than anything, is amongst the most misinterpreted counterpoints to the argument that women in country music are being marginalized. I believe it was something of a game of telephone that turned into something really kind of vile and misleading. Some think that saying is a statement that women don't like listening to other women on the radio. Some will have you believe that the women in country music don't like other female artists in country music, and some believe that women are just more inclined to want to listen to men. So there's several different interpretations on what exactly that means. I don't know who said it originally, or what the exact quote was. I don't know if anybody actually said women hate women. That might have just kind of how it became construed. If it is, hey, show me it. I'll stand corrected, certainly. And I don't know what that person's intention was. I don't think anyone suggested that women in country music hate other women in country music. I remember seeing Shania Twain post a photo of some artists that showed, hey, look, we like each other. That's great. That was a great moment. I don't know if that's exactly what the statement was suggesting. And no one really suggested that females won't become fans of female artists either. Here's what happens. First, in country music, there's a slight demographic edge to women listeners. More women listen than men. It's like a 60-40, 55-45 split. There's just more female listeners than male listeners to country music. Second, there is this thing called call-out research that I'm really going to explore here deeply in a second. But in general, I think many believe that women tend not to do as well as the male artists in the call-out research field. And there's a ton of reasons and theories, and personally, I think that call-out research is kind of a way to justify jobs and justify playing it safe. But there is some truth to the research showed that women artists don't score as well as men. I experienced this when I was a music director at a major radio station, and it was fairly consistent. You'd see the female artists score a little bit worse than male artists. As I said, a lot of reasons, a lot of theories, a lot of explanations for this. I'm not sure it necessarily means it's fact, but that was my experience when working with call-out research several years ago. The third is you get what happened to artists like the Gretchen Wilsons and the Dixie Chicks, whereas people loved Gretchen Wilson and the Dixie Chicks and really related to them for a long time until suddenly they didn't. And suddenly, lordy, was it nasty. And it really was. The women that turn are a really small minority, but they're vocal. They call the radio station, and they show up and they let their opinion be known. They're the one commenting on Facebook. Males too, but in my experience, it was more females calling in the case of the Dixie Chicks. I saw this a lot working in Battle Creek, Michigan. It's kind of a blue-collar cereal town where a lot of people work in either the cereal factories or maybe they work in the local automotive plants. And there's a lot of automotive in Battle Creek as it supports Detroit in some ways. And in a lot of areas, it's sort of a male-led society. Some rural, some low education areas. Good people, but you get kind of maybe some jealousy that maybe you recognize if you've just kind of lived. Gretchen Wilson represented their values until one day she didn't. I don't know what happened. I remember the term being lightning quick, and you can kind of see it reflected in Gretchen Wilson's chart and commercial success. All of a sudden, she was doing great, top 5s, top 10s, and then she wasn't. She can't get a song to stick on the radio. Women called the radio stations, and maybe, perhaps, this cost women a small portion of the audience. A small portion. Does this matter? Yeah, I think it does, because here's why. Call-out research. Here, I'm going to, in the YouTube version, embed this into the video. You have what call-out research looks like. And I'll hold this back up in a second. But the idea with call-out research is that a station hires a company to call known listeners and get them to rate songs on sort of a 1 to 5 scale. We used a 1 to 5 scale, with 5 being the best, 1 being the lowest. Quick pause. If I remember right, the company would call like 80 people every 2 weeks and play short clips over the phone. Short clips of the song. And then use 40 of those respondents along with 40 of the previous week, so you got sort of a rolling average week to week, and there was never any big changes. So you had 80 people, and a good score was 4. A really good score was 4. If a song was really, really good, it was like a 4.2 or 4.25 on a 1 to 5 scale. A really bad song wasn't a 1 or even a 2. The lowest score on this example that I'm going to hold up here was a 3.07, and in this case, which is about 7 years old, it's call-out research, Jared Neiman's song scored, I think, the lowest, and that's only about 9/10 of a point lower than the best score. Without a doubt, familiarity plays a huge role, and the test results prove this. And let's drill down a little bit deeper here, because the top 8 songs for us were in heavy rotation. They got the most spins. And they would stay there kind of forever. You know, the heavy rotation songs would kind of perpetuate their own success because they gained that familiarity. And there was sort of this gooey middle right below that always sort of struggled. You have your heavies, and maybe there's like 8 of those. And then you have your mediums, and there might be like 10 songs in the medium category, and then maybe 10 more in the light category, and then you have some overnight songs that only play between, like 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. That's generally how a radio station schedules its new music. You also have the recurrence and the gold songs, which are your older hits that you hear often. And those are sort of the bread and butter of the radio station. Those aren't going anywhere. But that gooey middle sort of always struggled because they weren't quite familiar enough to get into heavy rotation. But, sometimes there are good songs. And in this case, I didn't highlight it or anything, but if you look closely, you'll find Sonny Sweeney's song From a Table Away on that list. Hold on. There we go. That was a great song. One of my favorite songs of that year. She was in light rotation for us, and if I remember right, she kind of stayed there for kind of ever until the song died, and then we ended up kind of kicking the song to the curb and never brought it back, which is a shame for her. But what did Sonny Sweeney need to be in heavy? If you do the math, what she needed was 26 people who took that phone call and did the research to give her a 4 instead of a 3. That's it. That's the small margin that's making this whole world go round. 26 people gave her a 4 instead of a 3, or maybe a 3 instead of a 2, a 5 instead of a 4. It was a 26-point difference in total between heavy and light rotation. And heavy rotation on the station like I worked at this time was worth a hell of a lot. This was something that really kind of carried some weight, and maybe that song wasn't worth heavy at that point. It was still kind of new. There were some songs that were maybe more worthy of heavy at that point for various reasons. It could have justified medium by saying a handful of all of our callers might have had a bad day when they took the test. They might be part of that angry minority. 1,000 reasons why someone might just click 3 or press 3 on their phones instead of 4. Small scale. So there you go. Do women hate Sunny Sweeney? No, of course not. She's delightful. I've met her several times. She's a ton of fun. But 26 people, which may have been like 15 women, because we probably skewed more female artists than male at the time, thought she was only okay instead of good. And it is worth kind of pointing out that on this test, the male versus female score breakdown on this particular song showed that the men were actually the ones holding her back. But it's really kind of unfair to zoom in too much on one song from one test, because you don't want to let that speak for the whole process. Now, a lot of radio stations will tell you that this isn't the only tool they use. It was the only tool we used, or the biggest tool we used in my experiences. People will say they listen to the phone calls, the requests, whether or not they like a song. And a lot of times you just know if a song is good for your audience. See, if you live in a rural area, your audience values certain things that maybe people living in a metropolitan area don't, and therefore you get different playlists and different artists. There tend to be artists that do well in metropolitan areas before they do well in rural areas. An artist like Sam Hunt, the band Perry always did well in bigger cities, and they were a little slow to come around in some of those rural areas when the opposite was true maybe in some different cases. The issue is, there's another type of research called internet research that kind of works the same way. It's just done over the internet. That's another form of research, 1 to 5 scale. It's very similar. The issue is that there's a cycle here that kind of ingrains some bad behavior. You know, you have an artist like Sunny Sweeney who only made it to light in this test. That puts in like a programmer's mind that, oh, maybe Sunny Sweeney isn't that well liked. And if you have a lot of women not doing well, that perpetuates the idea that women in general aren't well liked. When really, it could be a familiarity issue. There could be 1,000 reasons. That's a big leap to make on a test of only 80 people, 40 new people week to week. And it kind of perpetuates and continues a cycle of maybe bad behavior. A little less airplay might mean, for a female artist, might mean fewer women on record label rosters over time. It means that the radio is a little more male dominant. So this goes back to familiarity. If your radio is dominated by men, what is familiar is men. So again, the cycle kind of repeats itself. Familiarity is men. You hear a male artist that sounds like what you already know, you're going to score that a little bit higher and rank those artists a little bit higher as well. There's a rule, a guiding principle of top 40 radio, that you don't know what you like, but you like what you know. I didn't make that up. That's a saying. That's a thing that people know. And the idea generally is, when you're in the radio, when you're in the car and you hear a song that you know, you're more likely to turn it up and stay tuned in than you are if you listen to a brand new song for the very first time. It takes a little bit of familiarity to really kind of appreciate the song all the way. There's certainly a lot of truth to that. And before you know it, this all kind of results in, only 8% of the radio is female, and some jerk with a hat is talking to you. But are these times really historic? Is this a truly historic time period? And how does 2018 compare to the glory days of Shania Twain, Faith Hill, Reba McEntire, and Martina McBride? That is the topic for next week's episode on the future of country music. This has been episode 2. I appreciate everybody tuning in thus far. I'm going to scroll to see if we've had any comments on the Periscope feed before taking some questions from last week's. I see a lot of people who joined. No one's commented directly. We'll take a look and see on Twitter if anybody has made any comments. I had 2 very, very good questions from last week. I had a lot of great comments, but 2 very good questions that I think need to be addressed. And let's get right to those. 1 second. All right. All right, first off, Marissa tweeted, "Thank you for," and I'm paraphrasing a little bit. "Thank you for your efforts. I completely disagree with your statement that it is a mistake to marry the Me Too and the problem facing women in country radio. And here's why." And then she links to the Rolling Stone article on sexual harassment in the country music industry. Marissa is the author of that article. It's a great piece of journalism. And I'm really glad that someone asked this question. This is a statement I made last week where I said it's a mistake to marry Me Too and the women in country music, the women on country radio problems. I was hoping that someone would ask, and I'm actually glad it was Marissa who authored this piece in January. It's great journalism. It's something that she's been on Twitter, tweeted about frequently, and has stirred up a lot of conversation. And it really shed a light on a problem in the industry that really lived in the shadows. I don't know that we're going to end up agreeing here on this, or really even end up agreeing to disagree, but here is why I said that. Making these two issues one, marrying these issues, flattens the nuances that make each issue extraordinary, and it also suggests that one solution could fix both problems. I don't think I'm the guy to take on the sexual harassment issue. But I will say that the women in country issues are complicated. It seems like a simple solution. We've suggested that simple solution. That's not working because the issue is more complicated than I think most people seem to realize. There's not an answer that's simple to either problem, even though it seems like there is. And I'm not going to talk in broad strokes on either issue because I don't think that's fair to either issue, and I don't think that ultimately will be productive. A couple more points here, though. I think the issues that you brought up in Rolling Stone are not really unique to country music and music in general, and I think that was kind of the point, to let people know that these issues exist in country music, and that was very illuminating. This is a wide-ranging cultural issue. It's a much, much, much bigger boat to try to turn around. It's not a problem in every radio station, or even really in the large majority of radio stations, so when we marry them, we inconsequently accuse people, or at the very least put people on the defensive who maybe have done no wrong and who have exemplified good behavior throughout the years. We need people to not be on the defensive. My personal experiences in radio are a little bit unique. I worked for two female programmers, and they're both very good, very professional. So I didn't have a lot of firsthand knowledge of any overt or subtle sexual harassment. The one instance I remember thinking back was when I first got started in the industry. I remember there was a DJ at a station I worked at who liked to surf the internet for porn. And I think at one point he showed someone else, another female employee at the radio station, some of the images. Totally inappropriate. He ended up getting fired. I don't know if it was for that or not. But that was the one instance, and I really kind of tried to rack my brains for other instances. So I think the Me Too issue and the women of country music issue are related. I don't think they're twins. And because of that, I think we need to kind of recognize them, that they each have their own set of circumstances and approach them differently. And in the end, maybe one will kind of help fix the other. Second question is from Ed, who wrote, I think we're talking about it more, and the problem is getting worse. So I wonder if those are related. I hope not, And I don't really think so. I don't. I think high quality, high quantity conversation will do some good. Low quality conversation will not. I think yelling at radio programmers on a daily basis is not going to do any good. But if we kind of try to understand why the radio programmers, who are good people and working in the best interest of their listeners, are playing the songs that they play, and try to get those people to work with us to include or feature more women on their radio station in some other more creative ways, even if it doesn't mean putting a song in heavy rotation on your playlist. There are other ways to expose female artists to your audience. Everybody has online streams nowadays. You can encourage people to hit the website. You can play clips. You can just do an interview with an up-and-coming female artist. Those things I think are important. Every radio station has some sort of pick it or flick it type of feature where you play a song and you get the audience to vote. These things are important. So no, it's a great question, and it's kind of true because we're at sort of a multi-year low in terms of women on the radio. But I don't know it's because people are talking about it too much. I'm not willing to say that, because the alternative is what? We stop talking about it and the problem just fixes itself? Raise your hand if you think that's going to work. I don't. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, everybody who commented and offered some support. And I appreciate everybody who offered a little bit of criticism as well. As I said in the first episode, as long as this conversation is respectful, I'll be more than happy to kind of go back and forth with you. I'm not gonna spend much time on the people who are just trolling. I think there's more important things to focus on as we sort of discuss this. At Billy Dukes on Twitter. I'm going to post the YouTube link here shortly. Share it with a friend. Subscribe on YouTube. That's certainly appreciated. Next week we'll get into a little bit of the historical figures when it comes to women in country music. And we'll kind of take it week from there. So, have a great weekend. If you want to support a female in country music today, I'd recommend going to download the Carly Pearce song, or the Pistol Annie song, or my girl Morgan Miles, who she doesn't know this, but she kind of inspired me to start this whole thing. Long story. See y'all later.